Here's a delicious irony. The global field of negotiation science, taught in business schools, studied in nuclear strategy, preached in boardrooms, rests on principles that women have been quietly using for millennia. Not the hard nosed, poker faced tactics we see in Hollywood. Not the take it or leave it ultimatums, but relationship preservation, creative problem solving, shared outcomes over conquest. And it took the threat of nuclear annihilation for the world's most powerful men to admit it works. This part of the program gives you context, history, authority. So when someone tells you negotiation isn't your thing, you'll know better. It's not only your thing, it's your heritage. Before there was science, there were women. Long before Harvard built a negotiation curriculum, women across the world were negotiating quietly and constantly. We navigated peace between siblings. We brokered resources in families where there wasn't enough to go around. We translated emotions into compromise to keep relationships intact. We bartered, coaxed, mediated, and brokered without ever being handed the title of negotiator. Eve Rodsky calls this invisible labor, and it's powered households, communities, and organizations for generations. But because it happened in kitchens and kindergartens, rather than courtrooms and boardrooms, it was never named as expertise. Until now, the Cold War marked the birth of negotiation science. Modern negotiation theory emerged post-World War II when global leaders realized they couldn't keep threatening one another with missiles and expect anything good to follow. So, in the 1970s, institutions like Harvard created a formal field of study, one that drew from diplomacy, economics, psychology, and game theory. The result? Principled negotiation, made famous by the 1981 book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton. Their 5 core principles are now taught around the globe. Let's revisit them, but from the 2x lens. 1. Separate the people from the problem. Don't personalize. Don't vilify. This is what women do instinctively in emotionally charged environments, preserve connection while naming the issue. 2. Focus on interests, not positions. A position is, I want Fridays off. An interest is, I need time to recharge and manage school pickup. When you focus on interests, solutions expand. Neurodivergent women often excel here. We are hardwired to see patterns beneath the obvious. 3. Invent options for mutual gain. The heart of win-win. Not everyone gets their first task, but everyone gets something they value. This aligns with Groover's feminine energy work, receptivity, adaptability, creative flow. 4. Insist on using objective criteria. When things get murky, return to facts, salary benchmarks, project data, impact metrics. Stanley reminds us, information is power. 5. Know your BATNA, i.e. the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's your safety net, your fallback plan, your permission to walk away. Knowing it lowers fear and increases leverage. This framework is gender neutral in theory, but gendered in execution. Why? Because men are often socialized to fight over positions. Women are socialized to manage relationships. And in negotiation, that's a superpower. From warfare to workplace. The techniques developed to de-escalate nuclear tension soon found their way into everyday conflict resolution, employment law, corporate mergers, even family therapy. What's astonishing is how often the methods that work best, collaboration, active listening, empathetic framing, mirror historically feminine traits. And yet, as Babcock and Lashever point out, women still hesitate to claim authority in these conversations. Why? Because we weren't taught negotiation. Because we mistake conflict for danger. Because we've seen women punished for being too assertive, but also disrespected for being too soft. This double bind is real. But it's beatable with preparation and practice. Negotiation across cultures. The Harvard model isn't the only approach. In different parts of the world, negotiation is shaped by cultural values, some of which align even more closely with traditionally feminine styles. In Japan, negotiation is deeply relational. Silence is respected. The group matters more than the individual. Women tend to perform exceptionally well in these contexts because they've trained all their lives to read subtle cues. In many African cultures, community elders, often women, are tasked with resolving disputes through storytelling, parable, and consensus. This is high skill, high stakes negotiation. In India, indirect communication, context awareness, and family dynamics often guide negotiation more than formal hierarchy. Neurodivergent thinkers can excel here because intuition and deep pattern recognition are prized. In short, the more global our lens, the more we see that the feminine is not the exception in negotiation. It's the rule, quietly ignored by systems built to favor volume over nuance. Why this matters now? Women are still vastly underrepresented in leadership and underpaid across every industry. But the solution isn't just more confidence, louder voices, or better elevator pitches. It's strategic negotiation based on what already makes us powerful. Emotional fluency, long-range thinking, collaboration, resilience, creative solution building, commitment to fairness. That's the future of negotiation. And you're already fluent in it, you just need the structure to wield it with precision. Reflective journaling, your hidden history. 1. Think of a time when you negotiated without knowing you were doing it. What tools did you naturally use? 2. In your family of origin, who was the invisible negotiator? How did that shape your own instincts? 3. Which of the 5 principled negotiation rules do you already use in your relationships, and which one feels most foreign? 4. How might it feel to treat negotiation not as performance, but as legacy, a skill passed from generation to generation, now made visible